Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am recording this in lovely but overcast Escazú, Costa Rica, on Sunday, the 13th of July in the year 2025. And there is so much to say. Let's review, because so much has happened in the last week. And there's still more happening this week, but let's just talk about where we've been. And so the first thing, we know that last week I talked about the Uranus entering Gemini situation that happened on Monday, July 7th, which was just about a week ago. And so that was, us waking up on Monday morning in this region of the world saying, hey, Uranus is in a new sign. Wow. And I have to say that between that and the full moon and the station of Saturn last night, retrograde, this was one whopper of a week. It's too much big energy for us to process easily and quickly. This is too much big change and collective unconscious change for us to really just sort of go on with our days and our lives and our experience of our everyday life, okay? Just in a normal way. It just isn't happening. It's too much collective change at one time. Now, what I have been saying since the end of last year, and again with my look ahead to the year 2025 called the liminal labyrinth, the experience of this year, it's very much the in-between place between where we were and where we're going and how we navigate all of that. And that's why it's a labyrinth, because just as one thing is turning direct, something else is turning retrograde, and something progresses and something else moves backwards. And it's the way of 2025. And we're living it. So when we have no choice, we have to live it. We could ignore it. But we're going to be very uncomfortable. At least you can say, I'm blaming the astrology. I know what's going on. But, I want to say that I, clearly performed my work, as I always do. But there were days of exhaustion last week, and I wasn't the only one. So it's not like, oh, Deb, you're doing something wrong, or Deb, maybe you should see the doctor. Deb, it's my neighbor who's a numerologist. She was exhausted. I was exhausted. And then I talked to another friend this morning, and she said she's exhausted. And actually, she called me this morning, and I said, hi. And she says, are you an astrologer? And I said, yes. And she said, well, tell those planets to just cut it out. Cut it out. And I'm like, yeah, don't I know it? She said, everyone's exhausted. And don't I know that too? It was really hilarious when I picked up the phone and she says, are you an astrologer? I'm like, why are you asking? So I'm supposed to have direct conversation with the planets, especially the outer planets, which are so far away. And let them know that everybody on Earth is telling them to just cut it out. So, like Uranus would ever listen, right? Like they would ever listen, any of them. But this has been a one for the books. I can't say there were actual events that were off the charts and chaotic. I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that Uranus, the planet of chaos, changing signs into another sign that is more chaotic than the sign before. I didn't feel like my life was in disorder. I didn't feel like I couldn't keep up. I didn't feel that I was, falling behind or confused or anything like that. I was just exhausted. I was sleeping 9 hours a night, and it was still like I was still getting up and walking in the kitchen and going, oh my God, I'm exhausted. Even though I'd slept soundly. It wasn't tossing and turning and stuff, but it was sound sleep last night I slept about 9 hours, and I'd get up in the morning and be like, oh my God. And this is a definite shift in our consciousness. Okay. So when we have things like this going on, big planets changing signs, you're going to feel it, usually in your body, sometimes in your mind, sometimes in your experiences of, just interacting with other people. But the other thing was this week, out of nowhere, the surprise that I didn't count on and realize until later, was that we were having solar flares. So there was a lot of activity on the sun. And so it was definitely an experience of all of that astrological information happening. And then there was solar flare. So there was actually like activity with the sun, on the sun. And, you can't say that we're not affected by that. The sun affects the whole planet, the whole solar system. So that I think was a big change in activity for all of us, and probably affected our energy levels. So my neighbor and I were talking about it. I said, are you exhausted? Yeah, I'm exhausted. And then my friend this morning says, everyone's exhausted. And I'm glad to know it's not just me. So those of you out there who have been exhausted, my astro darlings, this is definitely a sign of solar flare activity and complications in the collective unconscious, where things are moving. Things are moving, and they're moving forward and backwards. And even though Saturn is in apparent backwards motion as of last night, it's still progressing into another realm. It's going into, it's in Aries, but it's going to go back to Pisces again. So it's going to finish that up. So we have to acknowledge where it is for us zodiacally, astrologically, wherever it is in your chart, and really finish up the Pisces lesson. So what have you been learning since March of 2023, when Saturn initially went into Pisces? And really, we felt this end of the zodiac, end of a huge cycle, 29-year cycle thing. And we're feeling this now, as Saturn is going to go back and dip into Pisces again before it goes into Aries to stay early next year. So we're processing a lot. Uranus just entered a new sign for the first time since 8 years. So I really feel like we have a lot of work to do in paying attention to ourselves, connecting with ourselves and our life, and what this all looks like for our life. What does this mean for us? So I just wrote a blog last night about all of this, about Uranus going into Gemini and Saturn turning retrograde in Aries, and the full moon. And it's on my website. You can go to thegoldenastrologer.com and click Astrologer's Thoughts, which is at the bottom of the page. And then you can read the blog. And if you are interested in my blogs, you can sign up. Before you even get to clicking on Astrologer's Thoughts on my website, there's a little box that comes up and asks you to join my mailing list. And that will put you on the mailing list to get you to receive the blogs every time I write them. So you can do that. And I don't write, so I'm not going to send you 3 things a day. Don't worry, I don't do that. And so I recommend that you do that so that you can actually see the blogs when they come, And also be aware of other announcements that I'm making when I make them about classes and events and things like that. So it would serve you well to be on the mailing list. So there was this Saturn station yesterday. And Saturn, when Saturn slows down, things feel heavy. In my alchemy deck, there's a Saturn card. In my oracle deck, there's a Saturn card and there's a lead card. And the lead, meaning a metal, is what relates to Saturn. And in alchemy, of course, lead is what we want to turn into gold. And that's historically in alchemy. And so you want to work with the metals. So that's why they're in the deck, right? But it felt very lead-like this week. It felt like lead. It felt heavy. It felt like we're dragging our feet. We're just dragging through the week. The week before didn't feel like this. Is when Saturn started to station the heaviness, and that just adds to the exhaustion, or the exhaustion exacerbates the feeling of heaviness. So all of this, if you're feeling it, this is what it is. You're not sick. You're not crazy. Barring anything outside of this, of course. You are experiencing what everyone else is experiencing. And this is very much about our progress of this year of 2025, this sort of liminal space we're in. So when Saturn starts to slow down, we get heavy. We get sleepy, we get exhausted, and with solar flares, we get really exhausted. And with Uranus changing signs, and we're out of one realm and into another. And I was expecting, Uranus is going to go into Gemini, we're all going to get anxious. And some people are anxious, some people are experiencing anxiousness. And that is probably temporary, but it's part of the whole program we've got this week. So this, I think, was too much. Now, the full moon was Thursday, the 10th. And the energy was pretty crazy that day. It was 4:37 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday the 10th. And I have to say, it was crazy. Like the moods and the energies. And so it was in Capricorn, as I told you. And what rules Capricorn? Saturn. So if it's a Capricorn full moon, we're looking to Saturn. Saturn who's slowing way down. And so it might have been a little hard to get our footing or to feel grounded. Now, full moons are always a little bit nutty. And I thought this was interesting because some things seemed to speed up, even though Saturn was ruling that and Saturn was slowing down to a crawl, to turn around. And I noticed things like I noticed my cleaning lady, she comes on Thursday. She was whizzing around here and like doing things too fast. And I was like, please. I was kind of following her around and like straightening up things behind her. But she was fast. And then we had a get together, a going away party for Amira, who was here with her baby. And she was going back to Austin, and we were saying goodbye, and we had this kind of wild party. And we were doing all these weird dances and everything, and it was such a crazy vibe. And it's like, this is a full moon energy, man. This is over the top, like, and there were so many people that came, and that was Thursday, and it just got wacky, weird, and wonderful in some ways. So it was a wacky full moon ruled by a stationing Saturn. Now I'm here to tell you that the party's not over yet, guys. Mercury is going to station. Mercury's going retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo. And it's going to do this on Thursday, this coming Thursday, the 17th. And this is the big aspect of the week, is Mercury's going retrograde. And that is at 9:45 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday night, which is 11:45 p.m. for me. And then in the Eastern time zone, it's 12:45 a.m. Friday the 18th, the morning of Friday the 18th. So shortly after midnight, 45 minutes after midnight, Friday morning, the Mercury will go retrograde in the Eastern time zone. And Mercury is the planet that rules Gemini. So now that Uranus is settling itself and getting itself, unpacking its bags in Gemini and starting to rearrange the house, because that's what Uranus does, it rearranges things. And here comes Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, and it's going retrograde. So this is going to put some more topsy-turvy energy in our lap, okay? I don't think that this is going to go by unnoticed, all right? And Mercury is stationing at 15 Leo, which is the cardinal axis, which means there's going to be wacky news, there's going to be fake news, there's going to be real news, what is the truth and what is not. I think there's going to be a lot of this. So this is very interesting because this is the very first Mercury retrograde while something big is in Mercury's sign. So this is powerful and important, and I want everybody to pay attention to this because not only do we have to pay attention because it's a typical Mercury retrograde in a fire sign, but it is a Mercury retrograde that is tipping its hat to Uranus, who's in Mercury's sign. So it's like yeah, you can live in my house, Uranus, but I'm going to like be a wild person for the next 3 weeks, And so Mercury is tipping its hat to Uranus, like, hey, let's make chaos together. What would that look like? Well, we're going to find out. And I find it fascinating that the planets are doing this to us, for us, where Mercury is actually retrograding not many days after Uranus has entered Mercury's sign. So it reverberates, So when we look at dispositorship, we are looking at Uranus now in Gemini, disposed of a Mercury retrograde. So this is fascinating, and it is going to give us some different information and probably some information about Uranus and Gemini. With Mercury retrograde, the truth is revealed. Mercury going retrograde is the internal workings of these things. Mercury retrograde is stronger because it's closer to the Earth, and it is slower and it's more deliberate. And so I think this is going to be a wild ride because, it's not like nothing's in Mercury's sign. It's not like right now we don't really have anything in Virgo. And we didn't really have anything in Gemini. Jupiter's left Gemini. So now we've got Uranus there, which is a chaotic energy. And Uranus is a wonderful energy. If we don't have Uranus, we don't have breakthroughs, we don't have brilliance, genius, innovation, revolution. So I find all of this, very fascinating. Of course, I have a Gemini moon, so I'm gonna be like, hey, yeah, like let's stir the pot. And of course, as I've mentioned before, that Uranus is now talking nicely to Pluto because they're both in air signs. Not that they were talking fresh to each other before, but this is really a direct trine now. They're both in air signs and they're talking to each other, and so I think we're going to take a step back during this Mercury retrograde and really start to understand what Uranus and Gemini is going to look like for us. And this is a great time to do that. So start noticing what your communications are. Start noticing what your meditations are like if you do them. Your journaling, your dialogue with people. And I'm already finding that people are misunderstanding one another and stuff like that. So that's probably Mercury getting ready to retrograde. But, and then next Sunday, the 20th, the moon will enter Gemini at 6:22 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to conjunct Uranus right away at 7:16 a.m., which means Uranus has moved a little bit, for the moon to take about 50 minutes or so to conjunct Uranus. But that means that the moon is ruled by crazy Mercury retrograde, right? Okay, so now we've got a lot going on. Now the moon, who is entering Gemini for the first time since Uranus got there, is conjuncting Uranus in Gemini for the first time Sunday the 20th of July, next Sunday, when we meet again here. And I have to say, I expect some rock and roll with that. I expect maybe some chaos, maybe some wacky information, maybe one of those moments of what's the truth, what isn't, what's real news, what's fake news. All of this has to do with the Gemini and the Uranus and stuff. And this is really going to bring us to some very interesting information. Now, the thing is, Gemini in and of itself doesn't necessarily want to go deep. Okay? But a deep planet like Uranus is in there is telling us we have to go deep. And we have to go deep in our communications with people, and we have to go deep in our conversations, and we have to go deeper than we've ever gone in order to understand things on a deeper level and really get to the meaning of something, okay? This means the meaning of life, the meaning of our purpose, the meaning of our dialogues with people. We want to start going deeper into our communications with others and our thoughts and our mental capacity. Our mental capacity is going to get stretched and expanded in a way we don't expect, all right, with Uranus and Gemini. And this is so important for us to understand. Now, any Gemini energy that's laying around that doesn't want to go deep is going to get triggered by Uranus and be forced to go deep. So if you have a planet in Gemini, or if you know someone who's got planets in Gemini and they just like to keep everything light and funny and witty, which is charming, they're going to get hit with something very profound, and it will change their lives. But that's good. It's a good thing if you accept it and don't resist it. You can't resist the outer planets. Like my teacher used to say, the outer planets don't care what you have planned. They don't care that you're spending Christmas with grandma. They don't care that you're having a beautiful dinner party. They are going to plow right through our lives and change things collectively and personally. Where do you have Gemini in your chart? What is very interesting is everybody's cooperating in the heavens. You know, Pluto's in Aquarius. Gemini with Uranus is trining that. That's a nice aspect. And Saturn and Neptune are in the beginning of Aries, and they're making a nice sextile to both Uranus and Pluto. So they're in the middle, and it's all peace among the outer planets with Saturn. And it's like, wow, hey, this is cool, right? But this is something very unusual, and everything's changing because of all of this flux and activity and movement. But they are also doing something that is sort of supporting the peace of this. So while we are all experiencing flux, at least they're not fighting with each other. At least this isn't Uranus square Pluto 10 years ago. This is Uranus and Pluto getting along. This is Saturn and Neptune getting along with Uranus and Pluto. This is everybody talking to each other nicely. And it really makes a difference. If someone has a baby now, they've got all of this in a peaceful relationship to one another. That's really pretty cool, right? It says a lot. So my feeling is there's a balance among the chaos, and we just have to go find it. And this is a great time to really do work on your mind and your mental state. And I expect Uranus to awaken us, and Pluto too, to a certain awareness around our mental capacity and our mental states. And if our mental states are less than what we want them to be, and I don't mean that you're mentally ill or crazy, what I mean is that you can do a lot of work on cleaning up your brain and its thought patterns and your mind in a way that's going to serve you better rather than let it distract you. And distraction could be at an all-time high with Uranus and Gemini, but what we really want to do with this energy is take it and harness it and use it for our benefit. And you can hear the chichatas in the background. Yeah. This is a time when we can advance learning about the mind and the brain and experiencing the depth of it and where we can go to heal our thoughts, our beliefs. Outmoded beliefs are a thing of yesteryear. We want to get rid of them. We want to clear up the energy of distracting thoughts and thoughts that no longer serve us, beliefs and thoughts that no longer serve us, that distract and take us down a rabbit hole from the past that we no longer need to go down, okay? So this is something that we need to pay attention to. The other thing that happened was yesterday, when I woke up yesterday morning, Saturday morning, and I wake up and I'm laying in bed and I feel how I'm feeling, the first thoughts, the first feelings I get, and it's usually a feeling. The first thing I felt was the desire to go down a rabbit hole. And I mean, come on, I just barely opened my eyes and my brain already wanted to go down a rabbit hole that was not going to serve me, as I just mentioned, right? Like the thoughts that aren't going to serve us. And I saw myself with a fork in the road. And I said, this is Saturn in Aries. Yeah, yes, it's Gemini, but there's Saturn in Aries because I was about to get irritated. I was laying in bed with my eyes barely open and I was about to get irritated, and I said, stop, change, change. This is one of the things we need to handle with Saturn in Aries, because it's very easy to slip into old thoughts of anger that don't serve us, stuff from the past, historical anger, things we never got to express, things we shouldn't have expressed in ways we shouldn't have expressed them that maybe we needed to sort out on our own instead of like screaming at somebody. But what I feel like is Saturn is really giving us a lesson on how to navigate our anger and our angry thoughts. Everybody's got anger. Sorry. I'm not saying you're an angry person and you're like, it's destroying your life, but we all have gotten angry at some point. Even if you've gotten angry at something you read in the paper, it's going to we get triggered. There's always going to be something that will trigger us because we have historical anger. And anger usually covers sadness. And when I saw myself about to go down a rabbit hole, I stopped and I said, no. If I'm going to get inflamed, I don't want to be inflamed. Anger is inflammatory. And one of the things we have to deal with Saturn and Aries is our inflammatory responses. So I would really recommend that this is something you want to look at. And it should be fairly straightforward to see yourself when you get triggered, what's triggering you. And that Uranus and Gemini is going to help us look at our thoughts a little more closely and what the inflammatory thoughts are and what triggers them. And if your mind works really fast like mine does, you go from one story to the next story in your head, and before you know it, you're triggered. So you have to step back and not allow yourself, again, to go down that rabbit hole. That I watched a fork in the road. I literally laid in bed and saw I can get mad over this or I can just let it go. And I'm just going to let it go. And I'm not going to go back for this stupid story. It's like dumb details. I'm not going to do it. So this is called catching yourself in the act or catching yourself in the thought. I could have ruined my day before I got out of bed. And I could have started my day with anger and irritation. And I'm just like, it's not worth it. And don't let Saturn pull you in. You don't let Saturn pull you in like this. You go, okay, I see you. I hear you. This is not where I want to go. And I do understand that that's triggering me. So I need to kind of find another way of dealing with it or just accept it for what it is and who the person is and not like keep going over the thoughts and dwelling on them and then not doing anything about it. If I'm not going to do anything about it, then I just need to stop and handle it another way. And so when Saturn slows down and it gets needling for us, we start to watch where this incredible fork in the road appears, and we have a choice to not go down the road that's going to take us to ruining our day before we get out of bed or some such activity. You would think that, well, Aries is, Mars, Aries, it's always angry. It's always ready to start a war. And it's not necessarily true. I mean, Aries are some of the most talented, creative people I have ever encountered. And I know Aries that are not angry because they've channeled their energy creatively. And they go, I can't do anything about that. I'm just going to keep going. And so they are just stepping into a higher form of creativity instead of the lower energies of anger. And like I said, if you're going to deal with your anger, you got to look what's underneath it, because I think anger isn't the bottom line emotion. It's sadness. It's depression. It doesn't mean you're depressed. It means you might have a moment of depression, or the sadness that isn't depression is underlying it. So it's one of these things. It could be depression. It could be sadness. And, I learned this many, many, many years ago. And it's something that we want to work through and really understand and heal. And Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries, certainly Neptune in Aries, is going to encourage us to heal the anger and what's underlying the anger. This is something we all need to stay in touch with and stay aware of as we go through this cycle of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Saturn first for 2.5 to 3 years, and then eventually Neptune probably for like 12 years. And it's going to give us the opportunity to really do the work on this. Now, Uranus and Gemini, along with all of this, can also trigger us very profoundly, meaning that we can lose our head and say things we don't want to say before we've even had time to think about it, because Uranus in Gemini is a very fast mental process. Okay, so we have to slow down and we have to consider everything and not respond with, an inflamed voice. you know, this is all really important. This is the final week of the sign of Cancer. The sun will change signs to the sign of Leo Tuesday of the following week, the 22nd. It's going to slip into Leo, and it's going to be in the morning, 9:29 a.m. Eastern Time. So we've really got about maybe less than 10 days before the sun goes into Leo. This is the last week of the sun in the juicy sign of Cancer. And it's been so delicious having the sun in Cancer, especially when it made that nice conjunction and new moon with Jupiter. And that feels like it was yesterday morning, and really it was weeks ago. So yeah, we're going to have the sun enter its own sign because it loves to be in Leo, and that's going to happen the 22nd. So it's a good time to still be with family, take family into consideration, security matters. Sometimes Cancerian season brings financial matters because it's about security, and sort of really connect to what makes you feel secure, what is giving you a sense of security and stability in your life. Cancerians and Tauruses really love that feeling of security. So while the sun is in Cancer, we like to make it arrange it so that we are really supporting ourselves appropriately, mostly emotionally. So if you have that feeling of emotional stability and security in your life, and it's real, then it can really help you navigate bigger cycles like Uranus and Gemini and Saturn and Neptune and Aries and Pluto and Aquarius. So Cancerian season gives us a chance to look at all of that and spend time with ourselves. And am I happy in my home? Do I love my home? Do I feel the security and the emotional support systems around me? Are they intact? And can I make adjustments to that? Do I really need to find an emotional support system? And that can be very glaringly obvious during Cancer season. So if you're finding those situations to be intact, that's a good thing. And if not, then we start to look at, well, where can I do some work with this? One of the other things that's going to happen this week is the sun in Cancer is going to square Chiron in Aries, and that's going to be Saturday the 19th. And if there's going to be any sort of familial wounds that we need to address, then that is going to be when they rear their heads, and we're going to get a glimpse of that. So if there is something about your support system that feels like it's perforated and it's not intact, then you may really want to do some extra emotional homework on those things, especially with the sun coming up to square Chiron in Aries. And then on Tuesday, I just want to say that the moon is going to oppose Mars at 12:16 a.m. Tuesday in the Eastern time zone. And so what does that mean? Mars is in Virgo, and it likes to be practical there. It helps us get, things accomplished and organized and stuff with Mars in Virgo. But the moon in Pisces and Mars in Virgo are going to be very close to the nodes. Mars is near the south node. The moon will be close to the north node. So pay attention again on Tuesday or Monday night as to what you are feeling around that, because Mars is going to the south node and it won't get there for about another week. But this moon triggering it at the north node, that's going to be special. There's going to be something in this dynamic. And the south node in Virgo is more about our practical thinking mind rather than our feelings. And we're supposed to be really trusting our intuition, our gut feelings right now, because that's where the north node is taking us. So there's a part of us that wants to grab onto details and obsess about them, as opposed to letting go and trusting our gut and our intuition. And that's something that may get triggered between Monday and Tuesday. So please pay attention to that and take the gut road, okay? Because the moon is steering us towards our intuition at the north node. Take the time to really sit with yourself and look at what Mars might be triggering over this next week, and especially when the moon triggers it at the node, because Mars there is going to make us very nitpicky. It's going to make us pedantic. It's going to make us feel like we have to, follow the rules and be really instructive and really be detail oriented and get organized. And there's something out there saying, whatever that is, wherever that is in your life, just trust your gut instead of overthinking something, okay? Because Mars with the South Node in Virgo could really be nitpicky and overthinking and judgmental and critical of ourselves. So be very aware of that before you start pointing fingers. And even if you're pointing fingers at yourself, I could have done that better, etc. Go with the North Node in Pisces with the moon. Just be aware of that. Trust your instincts, trust your guts, and trust in something greater than yourself, the universe, Mother Nature, Okay, and I want to remind you that if you are interested in finding out where these planetary dynamics are happening in your astrological chart, you should come see me. Just go to thegoldenastrologer.com and book online and just, set up a session with me. And, it's going to be really enlightening if you haven't had a session, or maybe you haven't had one in a while, to see where things are going, especially since so much is changing. It can really be helpful. The other thing is Reiki, and I was thinking this the other day. I really need to say my Reiki is not a typical Reiki. Like somebody last week was saying, can you give me an attunement? We don't really do that in this Reiki. I don't sit and I don't even really know what attunement is. That's a different system. My system, we don't just gently touch you and put our hands on your shoulders and stuff like that. I go right into your spiritual energy. I go right into your space. I go into your field. And I don't need to be physically with you to do that. That's why I do it on Zoom. I do it in person. But I go right into the space and see what's there and clear it up. So this isn't one of those Reikis that it's just sort of a gentle, nice touch, a light touch. That's not what I do. I've cleared entities from people. I've cleared blockages, old beliefs, old contracts, vows of poverty, all this stuff. That's what my Reiki does. I have the ability to break contracts, unconscious contracts, vows, cord cutting. This is deep work. I do deep work on you when I'm doing a Reiki. I'm not just gently touching you and helping you relax. That's not what I do. So you have to be ready for something powerful to happen when we do the Reiki, because I think people need to rest afterwards. They should rest during the session, and they should rest afterwards. It may not appear immediate that you are getting a big change in your life. It comes as you process that stuff. So it's kind of shamanic. The 5D Reiki really goes into your field and clears up what is no longer necessary. And I accept all sorts of issues and problems when people come to me. So just to let you know that. It's all available on my website. Follow me on Instagram for other stories and other information. And that's the Golden Astrologer as well. And there's always expansion mentoring if you want to spend more time with me digging up the old beliefs and clearing it all out. So that's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Thank you for listening. Gratitude to each and every one of you. Hope you're all hanging in there. I know this podcast is a little longer this week, but we had a lot to discuss even from last week. And I hope you're all managing these energies very well. And if not, come see me. Thank you so much for listening. Gratitude and love to everyone.